she reached the next landing, her heart skipped a beat. The same birdcage was there again, identical in every detail. The red bird's eyes seemed to follow her, unblinking, as if waiting for something. Claire's mouth went dry.
Claire's heels clicked against the pavement as she made her way home, the cold night air creeping into her bones. The city was unnervingly quiet, the usual hum of life replaced by an eerie stillness. She pulled her coat tighter around her, trying to focus on the warmth waiting for her at home. David would be there, her husband, with whom she'd had a petty argument that morning. The details of their disagreement were hazy now, and all Claire wanted was to get home, apologize, and curl up in bed beside him. The lobby of her apartment building was dimly lit, the lone overhead light flickering intermittently. Claire sighed at the sight of the familiar sign taped to the elevator doors, out of order.
Of course, it was.
She glanced toward the stairwell, its door slightly ajar, and steeled herself for the climb to her apartment on the 13th floor. As she ascended, the stairwell felt colder than usual. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting long, harsh shadows on the concrete walls. Claire couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, though the building seemed deserted. She tried to focus on David, on the apology she'd planned, but an unease gnawed at her thoughts, making it hard to concentrate. By the 5th floor, her legs were burning. She paused, leaning against the railing, and considered stepping into the hallway to catch her breath. But a sudden, irrational fear of encountering something, or someone, on the other side kept her on the stairs. As she resumed her climb, Claire noticed subtle changes in the stairwell. The shadows felt deeper, and the corners darker. The familiar, sterile environment now seemed foreign, almost hostile. She told herself it was just her mind playing tricks, but the sense of wrongness only grew stronger with each step. When she reached the 9th floor, Claire stopped dead in her tracks. Perched on the landing ahead was a small metal birdcage. Inside, a wooden red bird sat, its eyes painted a vivid, unnatural shade. Claire's breath hitched. She hadn't noticed it that morning, and there's something about it that unsettles her. She told herself it must belong to a neighbor, left there by some careless child, yet the thought did nothing to ease her discomfort. A shiver ran down her spine, but she shook it off and continued upward, forcing herself to ignore the strange feeling the bird had stirred within her. She focused on reaching her apartment, determined to leave the unnerving encounter behind. But as she reached the next landing, her heart skipped a beat. The same birdcage was there again, identical in every detail. The red bird's eyes seemed to follow her, unblinking, as if waiting for something. Claire's mouth went dry. She glanced back down the stairs, half expecting to see the same birdcage on the landing below. But the floor stretched into a dark, dizzying spiral, empty as far as she could see. For a moment, Claire considered kicking the cage down the stairs or tossing the bird aside, but she hesitated. A strange sense of weariness came out of nowhere and overtook her, convincing her it would be burdensome and pointless, though she couldn't explain why.
Just a little more,
she whispered to herself, forcing her feet to move. But the higher she climbed, the more oppressive the air became. The cold concrete walls seemed to close in, and her footsteps echoed in the otherwise persistent silence. Each step felt heavier, as if weighed down some unseen force. Claire thought of David, wishing more than anything that he would suddenly appear around the corner looking for her with a concerned, yet annoyed expression caused by her late return. But deep down, a cold realization settled in her mind. She was alone. The sense of repetition became more pronounced as Claire continued her ascent. The numbers on the stairwell walls seemed to shift, the texture of the handrail felt different, the light from the fixtures grew dimmer with each flight.
How long have I been climbing?
She wondered, glancing at the floor number.
Only the 10th floor. But I thought
Her growing disorientation fed into her mounting anxiety, making her doubt her own senses.
think I'm passing out.
She muttered, struggling to keep her thoughts straight. After what felt like an eternity, Claire finally stumbled onto the 13th floor. She reached for the stairwell door, dread gnawing at her as she feared it might not open. When it did, she felt a rush of relief, though it was tinged with lingering unease. She fumbled for her keys, her hands trembling as she unlocked the door and slipped inside. The warmth of her apartment should have been comforting, but instead, it felt suffocating. The shadows seemed longer, the silence more oppressive. Claire tried to push the unsettling thoughts from her mind as she headed to the bathroom, deciding that a hot bath might calm her nerves. As the water filled the tub, a nagging sensation in the back of her mind grew stronger. She felt as though she was forgetting something important, something vital. But the thought was elusive, slipping away every time she tried to grasp it. The bath water was soothing, and for a moment, Claire allowed herself to relax, the tension slowly draining from her body. But when she stepped out of the tub, a wave of cold dread washed over her. There, on the bathroom counter, sat the same metal birdcage. The wooden red bird inside stared at her with those same unblinking, painted eyes. Claire's heart pounded as she looked around the room, suddenly aware of what had slipped her mind. David. Her husband was nowhere to be found. But that wasn't what caught Claire off guard. David was probably in bed. What puzzled her more was that she hadn't thought of him once since entering the apartment. How could he have slipped her mind so completely? For a moment, Claire considered grabbing the cage and hurling it out of her apartment or smashing it to pieces, but the thought exhausted her. It felt burdensome.
I'll deal with it tomorrow,
she muttered. As Claire crawled into the empty bed, the space beside her gnawed at her thoughts. She couldn't imagine why she needed such a huge bed for herself, let alone the need for 2 pillows. But Claire was too drained to dwell on it. She fell into a restless sleep, the beady eyes of the red bird haunted her dreams, her husband David forgotten, his absence. Unbothered.